Welcome to the Social Media Church podcast. I'm Neil Smith, joined by a new friend to the podcast, but not a new friend into the online ministry world. Simon Andersson is joining us today from Church of the King in Louisiana. Simon, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. What an amazing privilege.
So cool. Yeah. This is definitely a privilege for me and for us. And this podcast really started in online church to really document. DJ Chuang started this podcast probably 12 years ago to really document online church, online ministry, and what that looks like, and how far we've come in the social media world. And so while we broaden the conversation to social media practices for local and online, today we're going to dig into online and really online discipleship is the conversation that I want to have. But Simon, for those listening, maybe first tell us about Church of the King and what are some of the distinctions of Church of the King, and then tell us about yourself and your role and how you got into the role of Church of the King.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're a multi-site church. We're part of ARC, and our senior pastor, Pastor Steve, is kind of running with those guys. Chris Hodges, Church of the Highlands, a lot of those guys, and we've been a church since 1999 in the greater New Orleans area. And Pastor Steve was at Tulane University, was radically saved, gave his life to Christ, and was doing student ministry. He ran an organization doing ministry in schools, and really just had a heart to one day plant a church. So he planted Church of the King in a suburb here on the north side of Big Lake. It's the longest bridge in the world, right outside of New Orleans. And so he planted this church in 1999, and it's really grown. We're a multi-site church now, and we're kind of in that greater New Orleans, greater Gulf South region, Baton Rouge to Biloxi, Mississippi, and then also just recently planted a campus in Atlanta, Georgia, and then of course our seventh campus, the online campus, which we've been doing for a long time as well. But of course, like everyone else, became a really big priority for us.
Yeah. So and Simon, I want to cut you off for a minute because I want to get into online, but you reminded me of that bridge that you talked about, because I remember my first time going to Church of the King. It's like, you think Long Bridge, like Brooklyn Bridge is a long bridge. This is not Brooklyn Bridge. We're talking like 30 minutes drive on the bridge going.
So the bridge, you can't see either side in the front or behind you. It's wild, man. You feel like you're in the middle of the ocean.
It's crazy. Dude, and I remember thinking, what if we broke down on this bridge? Like, what do you do? Anyways, it is. So if you've got to go to Louisiana, experience.
Hours I commute across that bridge every day into the city.
Do you really?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay. So let's talk about, how did you get connected to Church of the King? Did you start in your role doing it online, or what was your journey?
Yeah. So I kind of grew up in this church. I, started attending as a teenager in the youth group, and really established my relationship with God at this church. So I'm, I would consider myself a son in this house, really a grown here. And my plan was not to work in ministry. I went to college for computer science. I was going to work in software. So after school, I got a software job in New Orleans and was working on my MBA, but really involved in the church, in the life of the church and serving. And my passion really was, even at that time, was discipleship, meeting with younger guys and investing in the next generation. And one of the pastors approached me and he said, "Hey, you should quit your job. Once you finish your MBA, you should quit your job and come work for us." And I basically told him thanks, but no thanks. I'd never even considered it, and I didn't really even consider it at the time.
Yeah.
But over a period of a couple of months, I really just couldn't shake that thought or that idea. And so through a conversation with our senior pastor, Pastor Steve, he kind of just said, "Man, just jump out of the boat. You're not signing up for the army. Like, take a leap of faith." Yep. And he kind of de-spiritualized it. I think I was spiritualizing it.
Yeah.
So I took a leap of faith, and it was one of the best decisions I've ever made. I came on staff. The vision that they cast was, we want you to be our future online campus pastor.
Yeah.
We're not really there just yet. We have an online campus, but it's not a full-time gig. So we want you to help us get up to speed on social media.
Yep.
I have a full-time role for that. So that was my first role at the church, was in the communications department, helping kind of for our social media approach and ministry, but then doing church online as well, kind of a small part of my job on the side.
Yeah. And when did you go full time to church online, fully?
March 14th of 2020. And also full time communications world, because that's how we were communicating with our church.
Yeah. So you got a lot of attention quickly.
And we had a lot of support. I mean, our whole staff was coming behind all of that. So it was great. But really, January 1 of 21 was when I fully relinquished all communications and fully stepped into online. So
okay, that's awesome. So you're now a couple years into your role in figuring things out. What have been some of the wins, and what have been some of the, if you're willing to admit, some of the fall on your face moments, because that's inevitable as you begin to pioneer a new space. What are some of the learnings that you've had in the last couple of years?
That's a great question. I think some of the wins are, just the potential, the opportunity that's there, that's not there in a physical building.
Yeah.
Really not just seeing the potential, but seeing some of it actually come to fruition of what you're capable of doing to reach people in a way that's never been done before. And for me personally, to see those acts, to see like the life change, the real stories of people. Like there's a guy in England who's part of our church, found our church during COVID and has really given his life to Christ. And I've been able to personally walk with him and see just the tangible results of what we're doing, and that it actually works, something that we never would have been able to do 20 years ago, and really wouldn't have been pushed to do even if it wasn't for the pandemic. So I would say just the life change and the potential opportunity there, that. As far as the challenges go, I would just say it's church like it's never been done before.
Yeah.
It means that there's not as many manuals. There's not as many, here's a 1, 2, 3 step process. Yeah. So a lot of us are just kind of figuring it out as we go, which is exciting and scary and cool, but it's also kind of like, I don't know what I'm doing. I feel kind of alone in this. It's like, I can talk to people that are in other churches, but at least here where I am, I feel like I'm really the only one that's fully thinking of, or really understands and is thinking about it. Yeah. And I'm on the campus pastor Zoom call with with 6 of our physical campus pastors and me. And sometimes it feels like, I'm learning from them and the heartbeat of what they're doing. Yes. But the practical outworking of it just looks so different for me, which can feel kind of lonely, if I'm being honest.
Yes. How I feel that 100%. How do when and this is a question I've gotten a lot, is what, and I've got this. I've asked my family members this. When family members are asked what you do for a living, what is their response? How would your family describe, or what do you tell people when they're like, what do you do exactly? How do you describe your job to the everyday person?
Well, it's even harder when it's like my grandparents or something.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
Like, well, I'm kind of a pastor, and I don't really I don't really get to see the people, and but I usually just say, I'll describe our vision of planning campuses, and I'll just say that, as a church, we're a multi-site church, which some people don't even know what that is.
Yeah.
But I'll say we have multiple campuses, but it's one church.
Yeah.
And I oversee what we call our online campus. And really what that is it's a, in our heart, it's a way for us to take all the components of a physical campus and try to replicate it as well as possible online, and also go beyond that and do things that we couldn't do at a physical campus to actually be more effective to reach people in the digital world.
I love that. I think it's, you just summarized that so well. I think for anybody that's thinking about launching an online campus is, just look at what, like, some people are like, well, they try to just copy Life Church or Saddleback or one of these churches that have done it for a while. And the reality is that works because they did a good job of replicating their church in person. And that's one of the things that I loved in our, conversation prior to this is you just sharing about some of the things you're doing to replicate Church of the King. And a lot of it, what really caught my attention is the personalization. So can you share a little bit about when somebody visits Church of the King online, how do you integrate them into the life of the church? What's that kind of onboarding process of a new member to Church of the King online?
Yeah. Well, I'll just say before I even go into the specifics of that, I'll say that I think the heartbeat of our church and of our senior pastor is that it would never feel like a big church. Even if we get really big, that we would make it feel like a small church. What I mean by that is that you don't lose that personal touch of people feeling like they're known and they're cared for, and that you can actually find meaningful friendships and relationships in this church, And so we try to replicate that online as well. We're not trying to scale too quickly, because I think that can become dangerous where you're trying to automate things too quickly, and you have automated text follow-ups and automated emails, and all those things are good. But I do think that there's something special when someone feels that you're giving them the time of day to personally talk to them, and to see them as a human being,
Yeah.
And so we try to build that into every single process, including assimilation and first-time guest follow-up. One thing that we do that we recently started doing is we do what we call next steps, which is like, a kind of a growth track or onboarding assimilation process, what a lot of churches call it. And it's 4 classes or 4 experiences.
Yeah.
And we used to schedule those at a rigid time, one time a week, once a month, really. And that works in person, because it's like, well, they're coming to a service, and maybe right after the service they can come get a free lunch and go to class, But we realized that online, we have people all throughout the world, and we're trying to build a campus. We're not just trying to be the front door for people that are at a physical campus. We're trying to reach people and get them assimilated, get them connected. Then let's meet them where they're at. And so we started using Calendly to basically allow them to schedule those classes anytime that it works for them.
Yes.
And right now we're not big enough where that's not inundating my schedule with meetings all week long. And so it's one of the best uses of my time to say, hey, I'll take you through step 1 personally. I'll allocate 45 minutes on my calendar to meet with somebody personally that's new. I mean, that's like, for me, it's great because I'm getting to know our new people, and for them, they feel very heard and cared for. And it's like, man, I'm getting to spend time with somebody one-on-one to get connected in this church. So we've seen some good results come out of that, just that personal touch and not scaling things too quickly.
I think at the end of the day, and that's it's beautiful, and honestly, it's so simple, and I think that you're the second person I feel like that I've heard a very similar model to, and Justin Herman at Mariners Church has done a very similar thing where he's like, let's do coffee, virtual coffee, and he's got a scheduling link that he sends out, and it's like, why aren't we doing more of that? And the truth is, because we're often, especially online, thinking scale, and we're thinking we need to reach thousands, and we need to be Life Church or Transformation Church, and at the end of the day, like, God might grow us to that large, but the truth is they need to be doing the same. And honestly, I know that they wish they could if they aren't. And it can scale because as you're doing that, you're modeling for others who in the future you can use Calendly for multiple people, and you can use Zoom for multiple people, and this will scale. But I think you're modeling it, and I think you're building deep into relationships, and in many ways, you're church planting on the internet. And so it is a beautiful model, I think, that you are creating. And discipleship is done in relationship. And I think online relationships are the most tangible form of building an online relationship is a Zoom call. It's face-to-face. And so you're using the technology that is really free and accessible, or at most costs like $12 a month.
Right.
And what a powerful tool. And physical buildings, or even a cup of coffee, isn't that cheap. If you have a couple, coffee meetings. And so the cost isn't there. I think the biggest challenge is sometimes the time. And to your point is, look, if you can do 5 of these a month, 6 of these, 10 of these a month, the value of those relationships formed is huge. And so I think if there's no other takeaway from this conversation, I think it's man, you should be every church leader. I think whether it's local or online, should be looking at how can I use something like Calendly and how can I use Zoom to deepen relationships, but especially online, because it is such a powerful tool. It's such a simple tool, and I think we've kind of gone through this phase of like people got Zoom fatigue, but I think that's gone. Like we're now back into rhythms of how people are using. Everybody uses Zoom. That we're over having being forced to use Zoom. Now we use it for a high value. And we're used to using it, and so quit making excuses like Zoom fatigue and start Zooming, with your people.
For me personally, my wife's family lives in Sweden. So our only with them is on FaceTime or Zoom. And, we wouldn't use Zoom fatigue as an excuse to not hang out with them or connect with them. It's a tool that's so valuable to us to maintain that relationship. And I would say the same thing with who's coming to our church. If they are wanting to be a part of our church digitally, then they're probably the kind of person that would be very open to having a relationship like that. And I personally, I'm passionate about discipleship because I think that's the way God built His church. There's the time and place for big rallies and evangelism, and I'm all about that. But I do think that the way that we really build long term is through one-on-one personal discipleship, and it's exponential. It's not like it has to just fall on one person, but once you've invested in somebody else, then you have two people that are doing it, and then it just grows exponentially from there, and it could actually be even more impactful than a one talented person that can preach to thousands.
I love that. Is there, Simon, in your time of doing these calls, in the last couple of years, is there maybe a story or two that jumps out to you of like, man, this is why I do what I do. This is why we built an online campus so that we can reach this person or these people. Is there an example that comes top of mind for you?
Yeah, I mean, one that just comes to mind that we've celebrated a lot is there's a young man named Vinay who lives in India.
Okay,
and he stumbled across our church on Facebook just a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, and I believe he was already a Christian at the time. He had given his life to Christ, but he was very isolated. He was living in a little village in a small town in India with no churches near him and no really sense of connection. But he loved God.
Yeah,
he found our church and he really got connected with us. I remember the first time that I messaged him on Facebook, and I just we get people that kind of drive by, and you know what I mean. Like it just kind of landed our streams, and you may not see them again. But I messaged him and I said, "Hey, thanks so much for being a part of our online service. We're grateful." And he said, "Yeah, I love our church." And I love that comment because it made it's like there was this sense of belonging already.
Yeah.
So I started building a relationship with him, and through him being a part of our church, he's really just he's been charged with the Great Commission to reach people throughout his local community. And so what he does now is he just goes on prayer walks and he goes on evangelism walks, and he's sharing the gospel with these people in a very restricted nation, and there's no churches near him, sharing the gospel. People are coming to know Christ. He's water baptizing people in his village. And just recently, 2 years ago, he said he watched our Christmas service online, and he saw that we did at the end. He said, "I want to put on a Christmas service with my local village." Wow. So he put on a Christmas service, and 63 people showed up, which was amazing. 63 people that are all Hindus, and he preached the gospel. He bought candles. Wow. And so then it gets better. A year later, he said, "I want to do my Christmas service again." So I'm praying with them and encouraging him. I'm like, let's believe God for double that. Let's believe for 20. So he starts putting the work in. He's printing flyers, handing them out, inviting people to the service. And 930 people showed up to the Christmas service. And, just a couple dozen people even raised their hands and gave their life to Christ. And so he's like, we're kind of like, what do we do with this? It's such a cool example of how we've been able to be an encouragement to him.
Yeah.
To to really take the gospel to his local area.
Yeah.
And we're kind of like, man, what's God doing here? But
Yeah.
to just see kind of the beginning stages of that and being a part of it, just being
Yes.
in that relationship with him has been really cool.
It's so special. I love hearing that story. I think one of the things that I experienced with online church back in the day was the people that I would have an experience like that with. I would learn and be blessed far more than we were ever able to bless them through those relationships. And I know our San Antonio, when I was at Community Bible Church, our San Antonio location was blessed more than we perceived that our local church was going global. We are actually bringing the world into our local church and integrating the two. It's incredible what God can do beyond our wildest dreams as we just kind of open that door and see what God does. I was on a conversation with a pastor yesterday who was just going through that moment of, I was always resistant to online and the purist with it. It was like, but I keep hearing stories and of how God's using our stream to reach people. And it's like, I don't know what to do with it. But I just, at the end of the day, I feel like God's just calling me to steward it. And I think that's sometimes what we're doing is we don't in this situation, you're like, I don't know what to do with this, but I'm going to try to steward what God's doing here as best I can and best I know how, and we're going to make mistakes in that process.
Yeah.
But I think God is bigger than whatever flaws that we have in our unknown pursuit of God's calling and direction.
Yeah,
Simon, go ahead.
No matter what your philosophy is on church online, you just can't argue with lives being transformed by the power of the gospel. So whether it's a long-term, church strategy or it's just an evangelistic strategy, God is using it, and that's undeniable. And so it's cool and a privilege to be a part of it. I 100% agree with you.
It is, and I have no doubt that we're all making plenty of mistakes. And I remember my youth ministry days, all the things that I did wrong as a youth pastor, and speeding in the church van with kids in it. And God was bigger than my dumb, 23-year-old youth pastor self in that season. And God's, bigger than our mistakes that we'll make. But I think if we, with humility, pursue these opportunities God gives us, and he'll create clarity where we need to correct ourselves, I believe. But, so Simon, you at the core, though, what you're doing at Church of the King is you're just biblically looking at how do we do church, which came out of a biblical foundation. How do we then use these tools of the internet? As you look to the future, what does the future look like to you? What are some of the things you get excited about? What is the future of Church of the King look like online?
Yeah, great question. I think, our leadership team, we're all in with this. We're not stepping back. We're not like, oh, well, let's, our senior pastor, he jokes about how every January he used to make this statement kind of at the beginning of the year. Hey, if you're watching online, you need to get out of your pajamas and get in church, and he talks about now he would never make a statement like that again because he really believes that it's a viable thing, and that you have to kind of trust that people will make their own choices, like if somebody's near a Bible believing healthy church and they feel like they want to be a part of that, then great,
Yes.
But we do believe that it's a viable thing for people. I even think of Gen Z and the generation below them, like my kids, they're going to grow up in a world where it's totally okay and actually normal to just have relationships with people online. And doesn't feel like it's a subpar experience, or like if you like, let's say, someone that's, 3,000 miles away, that your relationship would be that much better if they lived next door. But they actually believe that the internet is almost just as normal and good as reality,
Yes.
And so I think we'll keep pressing into this space. Who knows what's going to happen with VR and some other things.
Yeah.
I guess that's to be determined. But for us, we're going to keep pressing in and going full force ahead with our online campus. We also see that it's a viable church growth strategy, or even for church planning, and I know other churches do that as well. But we believe that we don't want to just do the watch party thing. Like if there are people gathering in a local area and they're doing a watch party, great, we'll support that. but we also want to follow kind of the Macedonian call. If God is really stirring something, like in our Atlanta campus, it was birthed out of Church Online. There was a group of families that were watching, and it grew, and they were meeting now in 3 homes, and it was 100 people, and they reached out to us and said, "Hey, would you consider planting a church here?" And so we believe that those opportunities will come again, where God will open a door through kind of hot spots, or whatever you want to call it, where God is really stirring something, and people are finding a meaningful kind of connection with us, with our church, with our senior pastor, and that will plant campuses through that. And we believe that even globally, that we'll be able to. Our pastor has a heart. We have a heart for the nations, and I'm from Sweden originally, and my wife was a missionary kid, and we're real. We really. We believe God is calling us in our church to make an impact on the world. And I think Church Online will be a tool that He'll use to maybe get us there more quickly.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I've got a question, that I've got one, I love your pastor so much. Pastor Steve is one of just the greatest men of God I've ever met. And I think you hear that in this conversation. He's easy to follow. And he, he's such a visionary, and I love his humility of saying, I used to say this, but now I'm gonna eat my words and never say that again. And that takes humility, I think, as a leader to, and it's not necessarily admitting your fault. It's just seeing new opportunities that God is opening, and then pursuing those. And I think too, empowering you. I want to go down a tangent with that though, and I will after this though. But I am curious. You mentioned that you're from Sweden. I don't know anybody from Sweden. My family is from Sweden. Nils is a Swedish name.
No,
I've never met another Nils. Have you? But people in Sweden say it's a very popular name. Have you ever met another Nils being from Sweden?
Yeah, I sure have.
Absolutely.
I wanted to ask you that, but I didn't know if it was appropriate for this conversation. But yeah, no, totally. Yep.
Okay, so I've never met I have a Nils chair from IKEA though, and so when I saw that, I was like, I have to own it.
That's my wife's favorite restaurant of all time, and but the restaurant,
that's hilarious
for the food.
That's hilarious. So I want to. So one of the things that Pastor Steve does though that I have enjoyed in my meetings with him is he repeats, like, let me repeat this so that you can understand it. So one of the things I want to repeat for the people listening to this podcast is, one, you have a leader that has vision that's easy to follow, and a leader that is going to empower you in that vision. And that a lot of leaders want to hoard this. And so I really want to encourage lead pastors to listen to this, is look at how Pastor Steve has empowered Simon and cast a vision direction for this. That's really critical and important. The other thing that I want to point out is I have not really heard you talk about technology at all in this conversation. And I think that's a really important point here, because the technology really doesn't matter. And even I mentioned VR, who knows where this technology is going. But at the end of the day, what you're doing is you're seeing the ministry and you're utilizing the technology, but you're letting the technology just be a resource that you don't need to get way ahead of. You just need to understand the functionality of the technology so that you can use it to accomplish the church's goals. Yes. And so we've got to stop chasing shiny technology objects and just do ministry. And I think that's what I've heard is, like, you basically look at the technology and what's possible, and you look at what the church does, and you just connect the dots. Yeah. It's not rocket science here, but it's ministry done well. Yeah. And I think that's so important. And then, Simon, I think the other thing I want to point out is with that is empowering the right person. And I think this is both, as I think about the senior pastor, of like, they've got to empower people, but they got to empower the right person. And Pastor Steve knew you, and the church leadership knew you. They trusted you to represent the church well, to build systems and do something new. And I think too, we often are just like, let's just let the youth pastor do it on the side. Let's just let the technology guy do it on the side. And that's where I see it not working. Where I see it working is when I see, like, oh, this guy, he could be a campus pastor of a physical campus, but let's actually give him a greater challenge of using the internet and doing something that isn't yet as systematic in what we're doing. And so I think Church of the King is just such a great model for how to do this well, because I think a lot of churches are continuing to be like, what's our approach here as we move forward? And I think it's a combination of you. I think it's Pastor Steve. I think it's your systems. I think it's your approach. And I think God is already, I mean, these stories alone, you got a whole new campus in Atlanta out of it. You got basically a campus in India that is developing. It's like in your stewarding God's movement through, you're just leaning into it. So I love what I'm seeing. I love what I'm hearing. And I think it's such a great model for other churches. Simon, what other advice would you have as we wrap up this conversation for church leaders that are considering online church or really just getting started in online church from what you've learned?
Yeah, no, that's good. Two things come to mind. I'm sure there's more, but I would say number one would just, I want to echo what you said about vision. One thing that I absolutely love about Pastor Steve is he's one of the most high vision leaders that I've ever dealt with. He's amazing. I mean, I'm just so grateful to get to interact with him and learn from him. And he just dreams big.
Yes.
And it's important to have vision for where you're going. So, one of the questions that I think you should ask when you're trying to, if you're building an online church or online campus, is what are we trying to accomplish? Because there's a lot of different ways that you can go based on that. And so once you kind of establish what your vision is and what you're trying to accomplish, then the second step would be to build based on that vision, based on where you're going. Because if you don't know where you're going, then how are you even going to know how to get there? And where those tools come in, you can start to think through which tools are going to help you get there, but you have to establish where are you going. Yeah. And the second thing I would say too is data is important to make informed decisions based on what you're seeing, because I think a lot of people, myself included, I'd fall into the trap of this feels good, or I like this, or kind of subjective opinion kind of thing. But we've really tried to discipline ourselves to make decisions based on what the data is saying, what's working. So like one thing that we try to do is to change things up from time to time, and maybe change the way that we ask people to, like, let's say the first time guest card, hey, we're asking somebody to fill out a first time guest card. To change the way we're doing that, maybe do that for 6 weeks, monitor the results, and if it's working well, then great, go with that. But if it's not, maybe try something else. And if that kind of tanks or whatever, so it's like try things and make decisions based on what the data is telling you.
Yes.
And because then it's informed decisions. It's not just, and of course there's faith, and we got to pray and ask God for wisdom. And sometimes that even goes against logic and data, but I think data is just really important. It's something that we've been really leaning in on as a church because we want to make better decisions,
Yes. Simon, we're going to have you back on the podcast to talk about that in particular, because that is such an important conversation. So we're going to do that in the next month or two, because that's a whole, I don't want to, that's a whole nother podcast that we need to talk about. And I think it is so important because I think we have this data available, yet I so often hear, we feel like, this isn't working. I'm like, well, what's the data telling me? And like, I don't know. And it's like, you haven't looked. That's the beauty. That's one of the beautiful things of online is that we actually know so much more about the people that are coming, how long they're coming, when they got there, how they got there, that we don't have to guess as to why people are there and how long they're staying and what kind of response they're taking. And there's a lot of things that we can test and do and learn from the data. So we're going to have a whole conversation about that. And I can't wait to have it. Simon, how can people connect with you online? What's the best place online for them to find you?
You can find me. I have an Instagram. It's just Simon Andersson with 2 S's.
Okay.
Spelling.
There you go. The Swedish spelling of Andersson.
Or you can email me. It's online@churchoftheking.com is my email address.
There you go. We're going old school email on the Social Media Church podcast. That's a great call. I'm going to just put a plug too. It's also a missed step for so many churches with online that they're not emailing, that they're so reliant on social media. You need to be using email. When you're on my campus, people still use it, and it's way better than social media. And I'm the social media guy. Yeah. And so, use email. I love that you just put that out there. We're going to put a link to, we won't put that email. We might actually do it wrong because I don't want a bunch of spam bots to find you online by putting that email, but go find Simon online and on Instagram. We'll have that Instagram handle in the show notes at socialmedia.church. Simon, thank you for modeling Such great ministry leadership. Thank you for sharing so transparently, and we can't wait to have you back to talk about data-driven decisions.
Love it. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and thanks everyone for listening. If you would, leave a rating or review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever it is you're listening, and go to socialmedia.church for the show notes and everything else and old episodes there. We appreciate you listening. We'll talk to you again on the next episode.